What if General Grievous left his post on the Invisible Hand to go and save Dooku before Anakin could kill him? That's our story for today. Hope you guys enjoyed this one as much as I enjoyed writing it, and let's get right into it. Our story begins on the bridge of the Invisible Hand flagship as General Grievous is monitoring the battle outside. Grievous was barking commands at the Neimoidians and battle droids in here at their consoles as the Republic ships blasted them with volleys of cannon fire. Grievous had to hold on to a panel as another blast rocked the ship, and he angrily yelled out to no one that this plan makes no sense. He captured Palpatine, no thanks to Dooku, and now the Chancellor was just strapped up into a chair in the Spire as this command ship sunk deeper into the heart of the battle. They should be in hyperspace, halfway to anywhere else in the galaxy. Grievous knew he had his orders, and typically he wouldn't question them, but something was just so off about all of this. The Jedi were here. What are they waiting for? Then Grievous turned to a Neimoidian and ordered that they show him security footage of the Spire immediately. The stumbling, stuttering Neimoidian hurried over to Grievous and flicked on the recording, and Grievous slammed his mechanical fist into a control panel. Dooku was now dueling with both Skywalker and Kenobi, so Grievous decided he would make his own alterations to these grand plans. He told the droids on board to put all of the ship's power into the shields, find an opening to jump to hyperspace. Once that opening is found, do not hesitate to make the jump. The Chancellor is in their grasp, and he will not allow these games with the Jedi to ruin his victory. And so, as the droids began to maneuver the ship out of this huge cluster of battle, Grievous stomped through the halls and over to the Spire, where he would end this. As Grievous rose up in the turbo lift, he felt something he rarely felt these days. It was fear. He didn't fear the Jedi or Palpatine. He feared the consequences of disobeying Dooku and Sidious, wherever Sidious may be. But Grievous hid this fear away as he told himself all of this was necessary. And soon, the doors slid open as Grievous would see it. Anakin Skywalker twirled his saber, cutting Dooku's hands off, sending Dooku down to his knees, and Skywalker placed both blades across his neck. And Grievous looked around, seeing the unconscious Kenobi, and he acted quickly. Palpatine was too focused on this victory to notice what Grievous was doing, and by the time he barked at Anakin to do it, Grievous announced his arrival with a lightsaber igniting in front of Obi-Wan's neck. Grievous was holding up Obi-Wan as he looked to Anakin, Dooku, and then to Palpatine, and Grievous told Anakin that if he kills Dooku, then Kenobi dies with him. Anakin's eyes shifted, and he began to let go of the dark trance that he was just in, but Palpatine didn't stop trying. He told Anakin that this is a necessary sacrifice. Kill Dooku, end this war. It's what Obi-Wan would want. But these words had the opposite effect for Anakin. He knew what Obi-Wan would actually want. He would want Anakin to be a good Jedi, follow the Jedi teachings by not killing an unarmed, helpless man in Dooku. So Anakin threw away the red saber, and he told Grievous to put down Obi-Wan. Grievous, for as reckless as he can often be, was not stupid. Dooku was the North Star of the Separatists. If he dies, they all wither away, and the Republic wins. Grievous could not risk Dooku's death, so he threw Obi-Wan down as the Jedi Master slumped against the wall, still unconscious. And now, silence was held in the air for a long while as everyone contemplated their next moves in this grand game of chess. Dooku just realized he was meant to be expendable. Palpatine was trying to trade him in for Skywalker, and so Dooku, realizing he has already lost everything, looked up at Anakin and just blurted out the truth. He told Skywalker that Palpatine is the Sith Lord in control of the war. He is Darth Sidious. The words barely registered in Anakin's mind, and even Grievous was extremely caught off guard by this. But as Anakin contemplated it, he realized Dooku had no reason to lie, and that meant the entire attack on Coruscant was orchestrated by Palpatine. Anakin did not yet know if Padme survived the attack. She could be badly hurt or even dead, and right now that was all that mattered. Anakin turned his blade towards Sidious, but the Sith Lord suddenly broke free of the shackles, reaching out his hands and firing lightning into Grievous as the cyborg was sent crashing into the balcony. Sidious then reached out and grabbed both Skywalker and Dooku with the Force, lifting them, choking them. Anakin clawed at his throat, and Dooku would have if he still had hands. Palpatine embraced his full power, telling Anakin that he was always meant to be the apprentice to him, but he can easily move on to his own child. A huge smile formed on Palpatine's face as he basked in their suffering, as Anakin came to realize the truth. Padme was pregnant, and he would never meet his own child, but this gave Anakin a bit of hope, as he came to realize Padme is still alive. Sidious laughed, saying the child will become a Sith. So Anakin closed his own eyes, reaching out to Obi-Wan with desperation. Sidious still laughed, closing his fist more and more, as Anakin and Dooku were losing their strength, nearly unable to resist any longer. But on the floor, Obi-Wan Kenobi began to stir. He could feel Anakin in his mind, calling to him, screaming for help, and as Obi-Wan opened his eyes, he didn't waste a second, realizing what was going on. He reached out and hit Sidious with a huge force push, dropping Skywalker and Dooku to the floor. This time, Dooku fell unconscious, but Anakin landed on his knees, coughing, gasping for air, and Sidious flew hard into the window, cracking it, then landing on his feet as he spun and ignited 2 red blades. But then, to just keep adding to all this chaos, the invisible hand ship found an opening and jumped to hyperspace. Sidious scowled, angrily looking over to Grievous, who was now back on his feet. The droid general suddenly pushed a button on his wrist, calling for any and all droid reinforcements to his location. All available droids will be coming here, and he ordered them to kill the man with the red blades. Then he slowly walked over to where Skywalker and Kenobi were standing. The 3 of them now had a common enemy. Grievous ignited all 4 sabers, spinning them around as Anakin and Obi-Wan were on either side of him. Obi-Wan would never have imagined a scenario where he had to be fighting side by side with this monster. But what choice did they have? Sidious had to be defeated. So as the blue glow of hyperspace lit up the chambers, Sidious spun through the air with his red blades, aiming for immediate kills. And in unison, the 3 of them blocked the spinning strike, and Anakin struck back first, blue blade carving up towards Sidious, who twisted aside with his red sabers blocking the attack. Obi-Wan followed up, twirling his own saber in a defensive weave, blocking the Sith Lord's next strike, while Grievous lunged low, all 4 of his cybernetic arms swinging at once. But only 2 lightsabers were still out, while the other 2 hands snapped forward, sending Durasteel cables shooting from his wrists toward the Dark Lord's legs. Sidious cut through the cables, then reacted with a powerful wave of his hand, but Kenobi intercepted the attack, jumping through the air to sever the Force grip before it could take hold on Grievous. Sidious moved like a shadow, bending around Anakin's new relentless assault, his red sabers cracking against blue in rapid succession. Every time Skywalker pressed forward, the Sith Lord barely seemed to yield, always shifting, always waiting, but every time he went for a killing blow, another of his enemies would get in the way. His left hand flicked towards Grievous, unleashing a torrent of Sith lightning meant to fry his circuits, but Obi-Wan leapt between them again, saber absorbing the attack as his boots skidded across the deck. Grievous capitalized on this distraction, his clawed feet now latching onto the ceiling, as his arms spun around like saw blades, forcing Sidious to pivot, meeting his new unrelenting flurry of strikes as Grievous dropped in behind him. Anakin seized the moment, driving downward with both hands, forcing Sidious to block Anakin's strong swings with one hand, while blocking Grievous's blades with the other. This allowed Obi-Wan to move in and cut Sidious across his exposed thigh. Sidious hissed in pain, slamming lightning into the floor, as a wave of it sent all 3 of his foes falling to the floor. Sidious looked down to his wound, and he channeled this pain into more power. But then, their turbo lifts hissed open. A wave of battle droids stormed into the spire, blaster fire lighting up the battlefield in a storm of red streaks. Magna Guards flipped off of the balcony and flanked their droid general. Super battle droids unleashed their heavy wrist cannons, and droidicas rolled into position, energy shields flickering to life as they opened fire. Every one of these droids was focused on Sidious, and so the Sith Lord whirled around, red blades carving through the metal as droids fell in pieces one by one. Kenobi motioned to Anakin. This was their moment, and without hesitation, Grievous launched a smoke bomb from his cape, filling the spire with a thick vapor. Anakin and Obi-Wan leapt backwards into the haze, boots barely touching the floor, before sprinting for the elevators. The droids continued their assault, buying precious seconds as Sidious spun through them like a red tornado, movements lost in the chaos of metal, fire, and smoke. He angrily used the Force, picking up a storm of droid parts, throwing them out towards the Jedi. Anakin turned, using the Force to hold back as many of these parts as he could. A few of them got by, and Obi-Wan reached out, pulling Dooku's body into his hands, as both of them fell backwards into the open turbo lift, shutting it, and leaving Sidious behind with the droids that were still coming through the other lifts. Grievous scuttled into the vents above, his talons scraping against durasteel as he vanished. And as the doors to the lift were shut, Anakin was breathing heavily, sweat covering his face, and he turned to Obi-Wan, who was now slumped against the floor in the lift. And horror would strike Anakin. His former master, his best friend, slid down to the floor as a sharp piece of shrapnel from one of the droids was driven deep into his gut. Anakin hurried over to him, touching it to try and help, but Obi-Wan just screamed in pain. The shrapnel was in his lower abdomen, puncturing the aorta. Anakin quickly said he would get them out of here, but every movement brought Obi-Wan great pain, so he just calmly told Anakin to stop. The turbolift hummed as it descended, down its walls dimly illuminated by flickering emergency lights. Silence filled the air now, as Anakin knelt beside Obi-Wan. His breathing was shallow, his face pale with sweat, but his eyes were steady as he told Anakin to leave him. Anakin shook his head, his voice tight with emotion. He couldn't leave him. Not like this. Not when there is still a chance. But Obi-Wan somberly replied that there's simply no choice. This wound is fatal, whether the shrapnel was removed or not. He could already feel his life slipping away. Anakin reached in. He'd force heal him, but Obi-Wan said it's too late. It's over. Anakin clenched his fists, mind racing for solutions, but Obi-Wan just placed a weak hand on his shoulder, grounding him. He told Anakin that Sidious could not be allowed to escape. The Sith Lord was occupied now, but it will not last. If they destroy the turbo lifts, they can trap him in the spire long enough for the ship's eventual collapse to finish the job. Anakin refused. There must be another way. He would carry Obi-Wan, get him medical treatment. They could figure something out. But Obi-Wan only gave him a faint smile, the kind he always had when Anakin's heart overruled his logic. There was no time. Simple as that. The lift slowed and the door opened. Obi-Wan reached a hand out, pulling a thermal detonator into his hands from a fallen droid, then activating the timer with trembling fingers. He told Anakin to let him go. He will ride the lift back up, take out the other lifts himself. It was the only way to ensure Sidious is trapped. Anakin's vision blurred with anger and grief. This is not how it's supposed to end. He swore he could save him, that they would fight together, that they always fight together. But Obi-Wan's strength was fading fast. He told Anakin that his fight is not over. The galaxy still needs him. It was his duty now, not just as a Jedi, but as a man who could still make a difference for the galaxy in need of a hero. Anakin didn't move, so Obi-Wan weakly pushed him towards the exit, whispering that he was proud of him. Anakin's breath shuddered as he stepped backwards, gaze locked onto the man who'd been his mentor, his brother, his friend. The doors sealed between them, and the lift began to rise. Anakin watched the red glow vanish into the darkness above, and up in the spire, Sidious finally discarded of every last droid with ease. It wasn't that they were difficult enemies, there were just so many of them and they kept coming. He furiously stepped up towards the lifts to go and kill everyone who went against him. But as he got to the lifts, a huge explosion rang out through the spire. Sidious put up enough of a force shield to survive, but he was thrown hard into the far windows, and he was stuck here as fires were raging all around. And down below the spire, Anakin clenched his fists with his eyes closed, fighting off all of the worst emotions, trying to live as Obi-Wan would have wanted him to live. And he was snapped out of this as Dooku slowly stirred awake, and Anakin turned, kicking him hard across the face. Dooku wiped the blood with his sleeve that was devoid of any hands, and Anakin angrily told Dooku to stand up. They were getting out of here. It wouldn't be long before the Separatist ship came out of hyperspace above Utapau, and Grievous, back on the bridge, ordered the immediate destruction of the spire as the shields were lowered. The Separatist ships here opened fire, and Sidious could only watch as he was completely destroyed. The entire ship was in rough shape, but Anakin was hurrying Dooku down to the hangar. Dooku was fine with himself being arrested. He would fare better in the courts than he would in any sort of lightsaber fight, considering the whole not having any hands thing that was going on. Luckily, all of the droids on here that would stop their path were destroyed by Sidious, so Anakin would have an easy trip to the hangar, finding a Separatist transport shuttle. He and Dooku would get inside, and Anakin would take off. As they did, the comms would activate as one of the Nemoidians on the bridge said that this is an unauthorized takeoff. Anakin let Dooku speak, and Dooku just ordered the bridge commander to stand down. But from the bridge, Dooku would have smiled if he still knew how. He ordered the cannons to fire everything they have at this shuttle. Grievous knew the truth. Dooku was working with Palpatine during all of this. He was just as much a traitor as Sidious. So as Anakin flew the shuttle, it was suddenly rocked with firepower, and Anakin sarcastically yelled at Dooku that his friends aren't exactly helping, and Anakin went into evasive maneuvers as the hyperspace jump was prepared. Hyperdrive coordinates were set for Coruscant as Anakin tried to get an opening. The console blared with warning lights just as the ship now jolted violently, a blast from a pursuing warship tearing into the rear. The hyperdrive systems shrieked as alarms filled the cockpit again and again, but Anakin had no choice. So with the final slam of his palm against the throttle, the ship lurched forward, stars stretching into streaks of blue, but then everything immediately went wrong. The moment they entered hyperspace, the damaged engines sputtered, overloaded, and ruptured with a burst of energy that sent the shuttle careening wildly through the void. Metal groaned as the ship twisted violently, tumbling out of control as hyperspace itself seemed to reject it. A deafening rupture echoed through the hull as the ship was yanked back into real space, spinning uncontrollably before slamming to a halt in the black abyss of uncharted space. The lights flickered and died. The engines failed. The only sound left was the distant hum of cooling metal and the ragged breaths of the two stranded warriors trapped in a lifeless shuttle with nothing but the endless void surrounding them. And now Dooku hit Anakin with the sarcasm, saying he did a masterful job of getting them out of there. And Anakin had no words. They were stuck. And across the galaxy, with Palpatine, Anakin, Obi-Wan, and Dooku all missing and presumed dead, the war would be in its final days. General Grievous, now the last true commander of the Separatists, was quickly discovered on Utapau, fortifying his position in the planet's sinkhole cities. The Jedi would launch an all-out assault, led by Plo Koon and Kit Fisto. The battle would be fierce, with Republic forces descending into the depths of Utapau, while Grievous deployed his remaining droid armies in a last stand. In the end, the Jedi Masters would overwhelm Grievous as he was battered, cornered, and fighting to the bitter end, but his fate was sealed. As the droid armies fell silent and the Republic declared victory, the Clone Wars finally would reach their bloody conclusion once the droids were shut down on Mustafar. And on Coruscant, Padme Amidala stood amidst the celebrations, yet she felt no joy. The war was over, but something inside of her remained deeply unsettled. Everyone told her Anakin was gone, but she refused to believe it. She could feel him. The child of Anakin growing inside of her made the Force flow through like never before, and in moments of quiet, she would feel whispers, echoes of Anakin reaching out. He was connecting with her, with them. And so, she worked alongside the Jedi, pushing for an unprecedented investigation along the hyperlanes between Utapau and Coruscant. Fleets were dispatched, hyperspace routes were scoured, and sensor sweeps combed through space. She would not stop searching, even as others urged her to let go. And while they were stranded, Anakin and Dooku were just drifting in the silence of deep space for an amount of time they couldn't track. Their shuttle floated along, systems long since dead, rations were very meager, just enough to prolong their suffering, but not enough to sustain them for much longer. Anakin had resisted at first. He wanted to fight back and get out of here, but as the days stretched into weeks, he fell into meditation, thinking this was hopeless, letting the Force sustain him where food and warmth no longer could. Across from him, Dooku did the same. Though neither of them spoke often, their presence in the Force remained undeniable. They were enemies, yet now only their survival mattered, and neither of them wanted to be in here with a dead body. That was unsettling. Anakin's mind drifted beyond the physical realm, reaching for Padme again and again, feeling her presence like a beacon of warmth in the void. She would awaken late in nights with visions of frozen stars and flickering lights. It was all real. She knew it was real, even if no one was believing her. Anakin was still alive. Her conviction only grew, and the search for Anakin only got stronger. A distress beacon, a floating wreck, anything that could lead them to Anakin and to Dooku. Hope was fragile though, and it burned within her. On the 23rd day of them being missing, a patrol fleet picked up a faint signal, barely distinguishable from the hum of the cosmic radiation in space. But when they arrived at the source, they finally found a shattered Separatist shuttle, drifting lifelessly. Inside, Anakin and Dooku were sitting frozen in silence, bodies barely clinging to life. The Jedi and the medics moved in swiftly, breaking into the wreckage, finding the two of them near the brink of death. Skin was cold, breath shallow, but the Force still flowed within them, keeping them barely alive. Against all odds, they survived. And as Anakin was able to barely open his eyes, he saw Padme here, and Anakin felt hope. He would eventually wake up for good, back in the Jedi Temple. And Dooku was across from him, with Force restraining cuffs on his new hands and his legs. While they were away, the war had come to an end, and the galaxy was rebuilding. Anakin would say goodbye to Dooku, as he was convicted of enough crimes to be put away forever, and it would be in the depths of the Jedi Temple. Anakin would find Padme, and she would have a pod with 2 twin children inside. The boy would be named Ben, which was Obi-Wan's known alter ego name on undercover missions, while the girl was named Jin, after Obi-Wan's master, Qui-Gon Jinn. The twins brought new life to Anakin, and he would live on as a Jedi in ways that would continue to make Obi-Wan proud, as Obi-Wan and Qui-Gon watched from the netherworld of the Force, as Skywalker would indeed fulfill the Chosen One prophecy, not by destroying, but by helping the galaxy find true peace next to his family. And folks, that is our story for today. One I enjoyed quite a bit. Hope you did as well. It's, I don't know, it's a pretty simple one, stuck in like, a 3-week-long period, but that's just what I wanted to pursue today. A lot of it really just takes place in the same exact place, the Invisible Hand ship. But that was the goal. That was what I wanted to do with this story. Yeah, the main thing was just kind of, I think if Grievous were to show up during that time, it would just be pure chaos. So I wanted to write that chaos, and I had a lot of fun writing that chaos. So yeah. Hope you enjoyed the video, of course, in the end, we get a Kenobi death. It's always sad, but unfortunately for all of you, I really like writing Obi-Wan deaths because of the effect it can take on everyone involved. So yeah, he usually survives, but not today. Sorry. Anyways, appreciate you guys. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.